So in this video, we are going to consider looking at an exam style question, and that is, to what extent has the global shift produced winners and losers? So I'm going to talk you through how to lay out this essay question, and you can add your own case study detail. So first of all, in the opening paragraph, we need to look at what these key terms mean and what the command word means. So here it says to what extent. So we're looking at, has the global shift produced winners or more losers? But what we're probably going to come up with is the fact that it's produced a bit of both in both types of country that we're going to look at. So we need to be clear of what the command word's asking us. We also then need to make sure that we define the key terms. And in this instance, it's going to be what global shift is. That's the movement of manufacturing from high income countries to lower income countries over the last 30 or 40 years. So we can define that in the first paragraph. And winners and losers. So we might talk about environmental, political, social and economic winners and losers, or factors relating to those. So I'm just going to run through the format of the main body of essay after we've done our introduction and our definitions. So we're going to start with the positives, with the winners, the things that are positive about the global shift. And we'll start with high income countries. We can look at several factors here which you can exemplify and you can put more case study detail into. We're going to look at diversification of the economy as being a positive factor of the global shift, that we lost manufacturing within the UK, but that enabled us to become more efficient with things like tertiary industries and quaternary industries in the last 10 years or so, to do with IT and technology. We can look at increased environmental quality in terms of that these brownfield sites and areas of heavy industry have been regenerated and produced jobs maybe in the service sector, and improved the environment. New opportunities therefore come from that in lots of different areas, and that's got positive impacts on women, and the fact that a lot of these jobs might be part-time and might be geared towards more women getting back into the job market, maybe after having children, etc. For the consumer, it leads to cheaper goods and more choice, as we've got a lot more products abroad being produced, and we've got a lot more choice, and they're cheaper because production costs are cheaper in the Middle East and elsewhere. For richer countries, we've got several improvements, obviously. Overall, we've got an improvement in quality of life, which is takes in all of these factors. Infrastructure will increase as the TNC maybe increases the water supply or the roads or the energy supply, etc. So we've got an increase in infrastructure. FDI will be there in terms of the TNC investing in the country and putting more factories here. So we've got increase in wages, which has gone up from people working in primary industries into secondary industries. So wages will be increased. We've got a reduction of poverty overall, therefore, and an increased expenditure on services, because taxation will be higher, because the jobs that people are doing will pay better, so they'll be able to pay more money to the government, and that will improve the country's GDP overall, and the overall quality of life, to a certain extent, will improve. However, we're going to look at the negatives. So let's start with the HICs first of all. We will get unemployment, and we have had unemployment over the last couple of decades, especially, like I said before, in heavy industry and manufacturing. And most of those have been males, because they were very male-orientated jobs at the time. So that's very negative. Spiral of decline within areas that have seen a decline in manufacturing and heavy industry. So that leads to closing down of other shops and services, because people don't have the money to spend their earnings on that. So that will shut down local shops. It will shut down suppliers of goods to those local shops. So we'll get a kind of a negative domino effect, really, a spiral of decline within the area, and you can talk about that a little bit more with some examples. We've got deindustrialization, which is what this is. We've got an exacerbation of the north-south divide. Now, most of these jobs were in the north of England. They were also in Wales and the West Country. So we do have this dichotomy of parts of the UK being very much impacted by deindustrialization, and some parts of the UK and the southeast in particular, which didn't have an awful as much of an impact. So we can talk about that. An increase in crime and depopulation of lots and lots of northern cities. Liverpool's a really good example of this, where the population halved after the 1980s, and deindustrialization happened there, and a lot of manufacturing jobs were closed, and The population's now maybe only about 450,000, which it was closer to 900,000 at the end of the 1970s. So we can maybe talk about that as one of our case studies. And finally, we need to look at negatives in lower income countries. And we have obviously on a negative factor is environmental degradation. And that's due to deforestation, to make way for new roads, new infrastructure, new housing, but also to use the wood for building and other things, and then to get to maybe resources that are beneath the ground, especially in terms of oil and gas and minerals and metals. Pollution, which we'll come on to a little bit more, but a lot of this just environmental degradation. That's a big negative in terms of the impacts and the losers, the environment being the loser in terms of the global shift, especially in places like China and India. Workforce exploitation is obviously a really big negative, and you know about this. You know about wages being lower, you know about child exploitation, you know about outsourcing from factories into areas that aren't regulated, etc. Poor health and safety regulations, poor pay, long hours, lack of maternity leave, lack of sick pay, etc, etc. So lots and lots of negatives there. Unplanned settlements are also another negative of this, especially within the cities, because obviously you have a lot of rural to urban migration to the cities as people come for the jobs set up when the TNCs move over there, connected to the global shift. Pressure on infrastructure, resources and services within those cities, and a decrease in health, like we said before, related to this idea of land, water and air pollution. We have lots and lots of lower respiratory infections due to lots of particulates in the air because of an increase in traffic and energy production for electricity. So once we've considered these pros and cons, we then go back in our final paragraph to answer the question, to what extent has the global shift produced winners and losers? And we should be able to give a fairly balanced argument in terms of within HICs and LICs, who are the winners and who are the losers. But then what you might want to do is to evaluate and come to some kind of conclusion of whether you think overall there have been more winners or losers. Doesn't matter which side that you come down on, as long as you justify it with your points, then you'll get the marks, and the examiner will have to give you the marks, because there is no real definitive answer to this as long as it's backed up by your judgment and backed up by facts and figures on both sides. So to recap, we have an introductory paragraph where we're defining the key terms, making sure we've looked at what the command word is actually asking us to do. Then we can, the main body of the essay, will look at both sides, and ongoing evaluation is often better really. So as you make your points at the end of each paragraph, perhaps say whether that's putting you on the side of winning or losing. And then finally you're going to summarise and weigh up the pros and cons here, the positives and negatives, and come to some kind of conclusion over whether you think it's mostly made winners or maybe it's made losers, or a little bit of both, as the case may be.